Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to picture a scene for a moment. Just imagine it's late May 1968.
Okay, setting the stage.
Yeah. You're standing in a living room in Elmira, New York. It's quiet. It's nighttime. The air is probably heavy with cigarette smoke, maybe a little stale coffee. And right in the middle of this room, there's a woman, Jane Roberts, sitting in a rocking chair.
Right.
And she is about to do something she's done literally hundreds of times before. She's going to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and let a personality named Seth speak through her.
It's a completely familiar ritual for them by this point. I mean, they've been doing it for years.
Exactly. Usually the voice that comes out of her is, boisterous. It's energetic. It's got this weird accent that kind of shifts around. It's funny. But tonight is different. Tonight, when she opens her mouth, the voice that comes out isn't the one her husband Rob is expecting.
It's not the whiskey-drinking, joke-cracking personality they know.
No, it's not. It's something else entirely. Something cold.
The notes from the actual session describe it as distant, high-pitched, almost metallic. It's just a very, very different frequency.
And that is exactly where we're starting today. We are looking exclusively at session 412 of the Seth Material, specifically from the early sessions, Book 8. The date of record is May 27, 1968. And if you are listening to this right now thinking you know how reality works,
Or how knowledge works.
right, or even how life and death work, you might want to hit pause and get comfortable. Because this document takes a absolute sledgehammer to some of our most basic assumptions.
It really does. It's one of those sessions where the whole woo-woo factor gets completely stripped away and you're left with this very rigorous, almost mathematical description of consciousness. It's less like a ghost story and more like a physics lecture from a dimension we haven't discovered yet.
Before we unzip reality, though, we have to do the housekeeping. Before we jump in, a quick note. This podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
We are just here to analyze the text, explore the ideas, and see where they take us. We aren't here to preach anything.
Exactly. We're looking at the document as a historical and metaphysical record. And to give credit where it's absolutely due, the text we're analyzing today comes from the New Awareness Network.
So we highly encourage you to check out their materials if this sparks your interest.
Definitely. So set the stage for me properly.
Mm-hmm.
Why is session 412 such a doubleheader? Like, what is actually happening in the room mechanically?
Well, usually Jane goes into a trance, Seth comes through, and they just chat. But here, Jane describes a visual phenomenon before she even starts speaking. She calls it the pyramid effect.
The pyramid effect. That sounds like, I don't know, something out of a sci-fi novel. Or maybe a prog rock album cover from the 70s.
It does. She visualizes a literal cone, or a pyramid, rising up from her head. She feels like she and her husband Rob are at the very wide base of this pyramid. Seth, the normal guide they know, is somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
But at the very peak, at the pinpoint top of the pyramid, there is another entity entirely.
And that's who speaks first.
That is who speaks first. In the footnotes, they often refer to this as Seth Two, or simply the entity. And the vibe shift in the room is immediate. Seth is usually warm, very human-like. This new voice is pure intellect. It's devoid of emotion.
Right.
And it is here to tell us that everything we think we know about learning is wrong.
Okay, let's get into that, because the first thing this entity talks about is knowledge. And honestly, when I first read this part of the transcript, I thought, okay, this is just semantics. They're just arguing over definitions. But the more I read, the more I realized it's saying something actually kind of terrifying.
It's incredibly radical. The entity opens with a statement that acts like a premise for a philosophical argument. It says, knowledge does not exist, ideally, in abstract terms.
Okay, I have to stop you right there, because that immediately sounds wrong to me.
Why does that sound wrong?
Well, take basic math. 2 + 2 = 4. That is a fact. It's true whether I am thinking about it, or you are thinking about it, or if we are both fast asleep. It's an abstract truth that exists in the universe, right? If all humans on Earth died tomorrow, 2 + 2 would still equal 4.
That is the classical view. Yes, that's the Platonist view, that there is this realm of forms or truths that exist completely independently of us. But this entity is saying no. That's an illusion.
So 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't exist without me.
It says, and I'll quote here, knowledge exists as realizations, and realizations presuppose personalities. Think about the word realization for a second. To realize something, to make it real.
Oh, I see where you're going. You're saying that until a consciousness actually interacts with a concept, that concept is just what? Potential.
Exactly. It's dormant potential. It's static data. The entity argues that information only becomes knowledge when it enters a consciousness. It requires a container. It requires a thinker to hold the thought. Without the personality to hold the realization, the knowledge has no landing pad. It effectively does not exist in our system of reality.
Okay, I can kind of wrap my head around that. It's the whole if a tree falls in the forest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But why does this distinction matter? It really feels like we're just splitting hairs about definitions here.
It matters massively because of what comes next. If knowledge requires a personality to exist, then when that knowledge enters the personality, it isn't just a guest. It doesn't just sit there like a file on a hard drive.
What does it do?
The entity says knowledge automatically changes the personality and the camouflage structure through which it flows.
Camouflage structure. That is classic Seth speak for the physical body, right?
Yes, it's Seth speak for the physical body and the physical world in general. He calls matter camouflage because it masks the inner reality of energy. But stick with the body for a second. The entity is saying, flat out, knowledge is action.
Knowledge is action.
It means you cannot learn something without physically changing.
Physically? Like my biology, my actual human cells.
Yes, your actual cells. The entity uses this incredibly vivid analogy. It says, imagine pouring a liquid into a bowl. In our normal physical world, the bowl stays a bowl and the liquid stays liquid. They are two separate things.
Right. I rinse the bowl out in the sink, it's empty again. The bowl doesn't become the water.
But the entity says it is not like a liquid that flows through a bowl. It becomes a part of that which contains it.
So if I am the bowl and the knowledge is the liquid, the moment the liquid touches me, I absorb it, I become the liquid.
The bowl changes its fundamental structure. It becomes a completely new object, a bowl plus liquid hybrid. The knowledge acts upon the container itself.
That's kind of intense when you apply it to real life.
How so?
Because think about what we consume all day long. If I'm reading angry political tweets or watching violent news broadcasts or even just learning a really depressing fact about history, you're saying I'm not just observing that. I'm not just a neutral observer looking at a screen.
According to this session, no, you are never neutral, ever.
I am literally taking that angry knowledge and it is rewriting my camouflage structure. It's rewriting my cells.
That is exactly what the source claims. It says, in changing them, it of necessity is part of the awareness of the very cells it alters. You are essentially building your physical body out of the ideas you possess.
It gives a whole new, terrifying meaning to the phrase, you are what you eat. It's really, you are what you know.
Precisely. And this isn't just about negative stuff either. Think about when you learn a new skill, say playing the guitar or the piano. We know from modern neuroscience that your brain actually changes shape. Neural pathways are forged. Seth Two is taking that concept and applying it to all knowledge and to the entire body, not just the brain.
So if I learn to love someone,
that realization changes your chemical makeup.
And if I learn that I'm in danger,
that realization changes your makeup too. The entity is trying to tell Jane and Rob, you are not static beings. You are a constant flux. And every new realization is a biological event.
It definitely makes me want to be much more careful about what I read right before bed.
As well you should be.
Okay, so we have this high-level abstract concept that knowledge equals biological change. But the session shifts gears pretty suddenly here. It stops talking about the philosophy of knowledge and starts talking about the actual people in the room, specifically Rob.
Yes, Joseph, as the entity calls him.
Now, usually Rob is just the scribe. He sits there, he smokes his pipe, he writes down what Jane says in shorthand. He's the dutiful, quiet husband. But in this session, the entity turns the spotlight directly on him.
It does. It addresses him directly, and it redefines his role completely.
What does it say?
It says, you act as a transmitter, Joseph.
A transmitter? Wait, I thought Jane was the transmitter. She's the one with the literal voice coming out of her mouth.
Technically, in this model, Jane is the receiver. She picks up the signal from the other side, if you want to call it that. But the entity explains that the signal is fragile. It needs a massive boost to manifest in our heavy physical reality.
So Rob is the booster.
The entity says, Rupert, that's Jane and you together, provide the necessary channels. It heavily implies that the signal passes through Rob to be strengthened before Jane can even vocalize it.
So they're a team. They're a circuit. You can't have the light bulb turn on without the battery.
Exactly. And the entity gives this fascinating reason for why Rob is so good at this specific job. It ties back to a past life.
Oh, I love the past life stuff in these sessions. It's always so incredibly specific. Where was Rob?
Boston, early 19th century.
A classic setting.
And he was a minister.
Okay, so he was used to speaking to crowds. He was a public figure.
It's more than just being public. The entity says that in that life, Rob was a receiver, just like Jane is now. He was channeling information, perhaps calling it divine inspiration or sermons at the time. But here is the kicker. His congregation acted as the transmitting agency.
Wait, unpack that for me. The regular people sitting in the pews were the battery.
Yes. Think about a charismatic preacher or even a rock star today. They stand on stage, but where does the massive energy come from?
The crowd. It feeds them.
The collective energy of the congregation provided the juice that allowed Rob the minister to receive his inspiration. He literally needed that wall of human energy to open his channel.
And that makes so much sense. You hear performers talk about that all the time. The audience was electric tonight. We fed off their energy.
Exactly. But now, in 1968, Rob doesn't have a congregation. He's just one guy sitting in a small living room in upstate New York. He doesn't have 500 people focusing their energy on him.
So how does the circuit work?
The entity explains that because of that past experience, Rob's personality structure was permanently altered. He kept that capacity. So now, as one single individual, he serves in the place of the entire congregation.
Ooh, so Rob is basically a one-man congregation energetically.
In terms of the sheer energy he can transmit, yes. He provides the support energy of a whole group. He is the crowd condensed into one man.
That is a staggering amount of pressure on Rob. No wonder he gets so tired during these sessions.
It might explain a lot, but the entity says this isn't random at all. It says it was hardly any coincidence that you met.
It's the ultimate romantic destiny trope, isn't it?
It really is, but completely stripped of the fairy tale aspect and replaced with pure mechanics. The source says their personality structures were already prepared for this work. They fit together like perfectly matched puzzle pieces of energy.
And didn't it say something about their marriage specifically?
Yes. The entity relaying a message from Seth says that this innate ability and mission prevented you from marrying until you met someone who would be able to help you along these lines.
So Rob couldn't marry anyone else because he had to wait for his battery mate.
Or rather, he had to wait for the person for whom he could be the battery. It was a lock-and-key situation. If he had married someone else, someone who wasn't a receiver, that minister energy would have had nowhere to go. It would have been completely wasted.
That is surprisingly sweet for a disembodied, cold, metallic entity.
It shows the deep complexity of the planning behind the scenes. Lives aren't just thrown together randomly. Even the cold entity acknowledges the absolute necessity of that human partnership.
So we have knowledge literally changing ourselves, and we have Rob acting as a human power plant because he used to be a minister in Boston. But then the conversation takes a turn into what I can only describe as psychedelic.
Ah, yes. Segment 3, the consciousness of objects.
This is where the vibe shifts from interesting metaphysical theory to, okay, now I'm looking at my coffee table with deep suspicion.
Well, you should be.
The entity starts talking about paper, specifically the paper of a newspaper.
Right. So the entity is doubling down on the idea that consciousness is everywhere. It's not just in humans or animals or even plants. It's in everything. It says, words on a printed page, for example, are not dead, nor are they merely inert symbols.
Okay, stop right there. Words on a page are ink. They're dried chemicals. Carbon, how are they not dead?
Yes. Because the ink is made of atoms and molecules. And in the Seth philosophy, and this is a core tenet of all his teachings, every single atom has a basic unit of awareness, a consciousness.
So the atom in the ink has feelings.
Maybe not feelings like you or I have. It's not, worrying about its taxes or wondering what's for dinner, but it has awareness. It has a sense of self and a sense of its immediate environment. So the ink has consciousness. The paper has consciousness.
So the newspaper sitting on my desk is alive.
In a Gestalt sense, yes. The entity says they share the consciousness of the material upon which they are printed, and even the physical position of the letters makes each piece of paper completely unique. It creates a unique pattern of consciousness.
It's like Toy Story, but at a terrifying molecular level.
Yeah.
Everything is aware. Everything is watching everything else.
And it goes even deeper with art. This is such a beautiful image the entity uses. It talks about a painting of a tree.
Right.
We look at a painting and say, that is a symbol of a tree. It represents a tree. It's an illusion.
Sure. It's just canvas and oil paint.
But the entity says, the painting of a tree, while a symbol for the tree, nevertheless has its own consciousness and reality.
So the painting itself is a being.
It has a Gestalt consciousness. Think about it. It's composed of the consciousness of the paint, the canvas, the wooden frame, but also, and this is the crucial part, it's the result of the artist's overall conception.
The intent.
Yes. The artist poured energy and emotion and focus into that work over hours or days. That energy doesn't just disappear when they put the brush down, it gets trapped, or rather embedded in the physical structure of the painting. The intent literally breathes life into it.
I am looking at the poster on my wall very differently now. It feels like it's looking back.
You know, the entity actually addresses that exact interaction. The quote that really struck me was, "Anything that an observer learns from looking at the painting is always living knowledge that alters his own makeup."
Oh, it circles right back to the first point. The liquid in the bowl.
Exactly. It's a closed loop. You look at the art interacts with you, it sends out data. You receive that data as a realization. You think, oh, this is beautiful, or this makes me feel sad. That realization immediately changes your cells. You are physically altered by the painting.
So art isn't passive. We aren't just consumers walking through a gallery. We are in a real relationship with it.
It implies that the world is incredibly crowded with interaction. We tend to think of ourselves as these lonely little consciousnesses moving through a completely dead world of inert objects. Seth Two is saying, no, the world is alive. The chair, the book, the wall, they are all humming with awareness, and they are all changing you as you interact with them.
That is beautiful, but also incredibly exhausting to think about.
Or very rich. It really depends on your perspective.
True. But why is this specific voice telling us this? The tone you mentioned earlier was cold. Why does a cold, metallic entity care about human art?
The entity actually addresses its own tone in the session. It seems to sense that Jane, and maybe Rob, are a bit freaked out by how impersonal it sounds.
It's self-aware.
Highly. It says, my personality is such that it is not intimate or understandable to you.
It's not you, it's me.
Basically, it explains that it is based on different root assumptions than we are.
What are root assumptions? We should probably clarify that for anyone new to this.
That's a key Seth term. Root assumptions are the basic foundational rules of any reality system. For us, our root assumptions are things like time exists and flows forward, space exists, objects are solid, gravity pulls down.
The basic laws of physics.
But also the laws of psychology. We assume we are individuals. We assume our emotions matter deeply. The entity says it exists in dimensions composed of alien psychological activities.
Alien psychological activities. I absolutely love that phrase.
It's basically saying, I'm not human. I don't think like a human. I don't value emotion the way you do. I deal purely in the geometry of consciousness.
But don't expect a warm hug from Seth Two.
Exactly. It's giving us the high-level blueprints of reality, not the interior decoration. It's the architect, not the host of the party.
Well, fortunately for Jane and Rob, and for us, the actual host eventually comes back.
Indeed he does.
We need to jump forward in the session notes now, because right around 10:05 p.m., the energy in the room shifts completely again.
Jane pauses. She hitches her chair forward. Her facial muscles finally relax, and suddenly the cold voice is just gone. The alien intellect retreats back to the top of the pyramid. And our old friend Seth, the earthy, boisterous, humorous personality, returns to the middle.
It must have been such a massive relief for Rob.
Oh, I'm sure. In typical Seth, he starts with a joke right out of the gate. He acknowledges that Jane was uncomfortable with the other voice. He says he thinks my friend a cold fish.
A cold fish.
And then he adds, humorously, but then, he was never a Finn.
Oh, man. That is a terrible pun.
It's a classic Seth pun. He loves wordplay. But notice what he's doing here. He's grounding them. He's using humor to bring the vibration back down to earth, to make them feel safe and normal again.
Right. But almost immediately, the humor evaporates. Because there's a very specific, very tragic reason Seth has come through tonight.
Yes. We need to talk about the events of the previous Wednesday, May 22nd, 1968.
This is a real-world event discussed in the session, which makes it feel so grounded.
The suicide.
A woman who is known to Jane's circle.
Indirectly, yes. A student in Jane's ESP class had requested help for her. This woman was in deep, deep distress. She had threatened to take her own life. And Seth had actually recorded a tape for her.
This is the part that really haunts me. There was a tape. There was a direct intervention waiting for her.
But she never listened to it.
She just refused.
Seth says she refused to do so even though she had requested the session.
That is heartbreaking. It's like throwing a life preserver to someone drowning and just watching them push it away.
It is. And this brings us to the second major pillar of today's deep dive, the mechanics of probability.
Because it's so easy to look at a suicide and say, well, it was meant to be, or it was her fate. Or, conversely, to say it was just a total random accident. But Seth parses this with surgical precision.
He does. He uses a very specific phrase. He says, the woman's death was foremost as far as probabilities were concerned.
foremost.
Meaning it was the absolute strongest signal. The momentum was heading that way, like a freight train gathering speed. The energy behind the decision was massive and building.
But not inevitable.
Never inevitable. This is the crucial takeaway for anyone listening who ever feels trapped by fate. Seth says, and yet, at many points, she could have altered those probabilities.
So even right up to the very last moment.
Up to the literal moment of the act. He explicitly links this back to the tape she didn't listen to. He says, had she taken the session to heart, the probabilities would have been altered.
Which circles right back to knowledge is action, doesn't it?
It's the exact same principle. If she had listened to the tape, she would have gained a new realization. That realization would have dynamically altered her personality structure. It would have changed the bull, and a changed bull might not have committed suicide.
That is a very heavy responsibility to place on knowledge. It implies that information can literally save a life, not metaphorically, but by physically shifting the probability timeline.
It does. It suggests that a single idea, truly received, can derail a train of destruction. But she didn't listen. The knowledge wasn't received. The structure wasn't changed.
And Seth notes that there were past life circumstances operating, right?
He does mention that, but he is very, very careful not to use that as an excuse. He emphasizes that she chose the time of her death. It was a choice. It wasn't a punishment from God or a strict script she was forced to act out.
He also mentions the family. This part gave me actual goosebumps. The child who found her.
Yes. Seth says the child who found her knew beforehand that this would occur.
Subconsciously.
He implies as much. He says the subconscious knowledge of the whole family was involved. It wasn't a surprise on the inner levels. The family system knew the pressure was building to a breaking point.
And he makes predictions about the children, right? Which feels very risky for a channeled text making concrete predictions about living people's futures.
It is quite rare. But remember, this is a private session, not a public broadcast at the time. He says, 3 of the children will attain some prominence, for which the psychological loss of the mother under the given conditions will be responsible.
That's a complex web of cause and effect. The trauma of the loss is exactly what drives them to prominence.
Yes, it's the fuel. Without that specific, horrific trauma, they might not have developed the drive or the emotional depth to achieve that prominence. Seth isn't saying it's good that it happened. He's just dispassionately reporting the mechanics. Because X happened, Y will happen.
But he also warns about one of the other children.
He does. He says, one child will make out very poorly with health and mental problems if the probabilities are not changed.
If the probabilities are not changed, there is that vital disclaimer again. Nothing is fixed.
Exactly. He's reporting the weather forecast. There is a storm coming for this child. But you can still board up the windows. You can still move inland. The future is a series of likely actions, not a movie that's already been filmed and locked.
Did he say what happened to the woman? Like, after death?
He did, and this is incredibly specific. He says, the woman had already decided upon an Ohio birthplace for her next existence, some 30 years from now.
Ohio. 30 years later. So around 1998.
That would be the math, yes.
That is wild to think about. Somewhere in Ohio, in the late 90s, someone was born who was this woman.
According to Seth, yes. It illustrates that death isn't the end, just a reset button. And the planning for the next round happens almost immediately, or even before the death occurs.
It implies she wanted to try again.
It implies that the core personality persists. The suicide didn't destroy her, it just ended that specific difficult chapter. She picked up the pen and started writing the next one.
It's a lot to process. We went from Adams have feelings to suicide probabilities in the span of 20 minutes.
That's the nature of the deep dive into the Seth material. It never pulls punches. It oscillates wildly between the cosmic and the incredibly domestic.
Speaking of domestic, let's wrap up with segment 5. Because after all this heavy talk suicide, alien intellects, changing cellular structures, Seth gets very practical about Jane's health.
Right, dealing with the physical energy toll.
Seth notices that Jane is unsettled. Channeling Seth Two isn't like channeling Seth.
No, it's like plugging a standard toaster into a nuclear power plant. It's just too much voltage. The pyramid visualization takes a massive physical toll on her body.
So what's the prescription?
He suggests a strict schedule. He says, a dependable performance for 2 months, followed by a week's rest for a while.
2 months on, 1 week off.
He says this will allow their energies to regenerate safely. It's a stark reminder that even purely metaphysical work takes a physical toll. You can't just run the endless red line forever without breaking down.
I think that's excellent advice for anyone, frankly. We treat our minds like machines that never need downtime.
Agreed. If a high-level entity tells you to take a vacation, you should probably just take the vacation.
He also drops a little nugget for Rob about his father, right?
Yeah. Yes. He mentions that Rob's father has been in contact with a recently deceased relative, Alice Butts.
Alice Butts. Is that a real name?
It's in the source material. It's 1968, remember? And Seth says Rob's father's free now. He advises Rob to use suggestion to improve his dream memories so he can connect with this on his own.
It seems like Rob is struggling a bit in this session, though. He's just so tired.
He is. Towards the very end, Seth asks if Rob has any questions. Usually Rob has a list of questions a mile long prepared.
And tonight,
He just says, I can't think.
I feel that so much. After listening to Seth Two rewrite the laws of physics, I wouldn't be able to think either. My brain would be absolute mush.
Seth teases him mercilessly for it. He says, that is some admission.
I love that relationship. It's not reverence, it's friendship. Seth isn't a guru sitting on a high pedestal. He's a buddy poking fun at you when you're tired.
He is. Seth says, I will visit with you at your next session and hope to find you more bouncy.
Bouncy? That's such a beautifully human word.
And then the classic line that we just have to highlight. Rob thanks him for coming, and Seth replies, I am a cheap house guest.
He really is. He doesn't eat your food. He doesn't take up the guest room. He just talks for a few hours and leaves.
And imparts life-changing wisdom about the fabric of reality.
Best house guest ever. Just keep the cat off the rocking chair.
Yes, indeed.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the pyramid effect and the sudden introduction of Seth Two, the cold, abstract architect of reality. We learned that knowledge is action. It physically changes ourselves, like liquid changing a bowl. We literally become what we learn.
We learned that we are all transmitters and receivers, that Rob's past life as a minister completely prepared him to be the energy battery for Jane's mediumship.
We got the trippy revelation that everything has consciousness, even the newsprint on your table and the paintings on your wall. They are living gestalts that we interact with constantly.
And we saw the practical application of these theories in the tragic suicide case analysis. How probabilities are fluid, how choices matter up to the last second, and how family dynamics extend deep into the subconscious knowledge of future events.
And finally, we ended with the incredibly grounding reminder to rest, to regenerate, and to stay bouncy.
It's a complete package: philosophy, physics, deep psychology, and humor.
It really is. Now, we always say this, but today it feels extra important. We are just scratching the surface here. We are giving you the summary, the highlights, the Cliff's Notes. But if you want the full effect, if you want that knowledge as action to really restructure your cells, you need to go straight to the source.
Absolutely. You cannot substitute the experience of reading the material yourself. My explanation of the bowl analogy is one thing. Reading the entity's specific phrasing is another. It carries a completely different energy signature.
So where do they go to find this?
You want to look for the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth Material.
And the website.
Visit sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions. That is where you can find the books and dive into the New Awareness Network's entire library.
Do it. Read the words yourself. Let the ink's consciousness interact with yours. See what happens.
Just maybe take a week off every 2 months so you don't burn out.
Exactly. Pace yourselves.
One final thought before we go.
Hit me.
We talked about how the painting has a consciousness that interacts with the viewer.
Yeah.
Well, this audio file has a structure too. It has a reality. By listening to it, you've interacted with it. So the question isn't just what did you learn? The question you should be asking yourself is, how have you physically changed in the last hour?
Oh, I'm going to be thinking about that all night. My cells are buzzing.
Good, let them buzz.
Thank you. And thank you, listener. Stay curious, keep transmitting, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.